It contains strong language. Viewer discretion advised.
Why don't we have a discussion and see if you could figure this one out? We think we're so advanced with our computers and our technology. Oh, we figured everything out. You know what every branch of science has had in common now for the past several thousand years? They've always thought that their shit was right. And then 20, 30 years later, sometimes more, sometimes less, they were always proven wrong. The people in just the very near future were like, oh, those people were morons. Yeah, they had everything wrong. We think we're so right. We understand how things work. We certainly don't. Let's explain something that Mother Nature doesn't deal in. Dualities, okay? There's no such thing as a wave-particle duality. What we think we understand about light is an absolute absurdity. You know, people always quote to me, Walter Russell. Well, I'm the person that digitized Walter Russell's works, by the way. I'm very familiar with Walter Russell's writings and extremely familiar with Nikola Tesla's writings on light. The one thing Walter Russell did get right is Walter Russell said that light does not travel. Well, sure it travels, right? Yeah, that's what we think. Russell never defined a field. He never understood electromagnetic retardation. That's exactly what it's called. He understood phase shift. He never defined a field. Neither did Tesla, for that matter. Well, sure they did. I have a lot of people say, oh, you're not the first person to discover this. I'm like, really? Why don't you go show me a damn quote where anybody else is talking about this stuff? I mean, I'm about to quote Tesla. I just quoted you Walter Russell. Other than the quotes that I'm about to give you, they said nothing further on the matter. So if you think someone else came up with it first, then maybe you should point me to a quote where you think it exists of somebody who discovered it first, because it doesn't exist in a whole. Obviously, they discovered parts of it. So Walter Russell is certainly correct in saying that light does not travel. That certainly goes against our modern conception of light propagating through space. Well, space has no properties. There's nothing to propagate through space. Well, what about a medium? Well, something's propagating through the ether, i.e. medium. Well, there's nothing propagating through that medium, but let's discuss that in a second. Let's first start off with a person. By the way, most people don't know this. See, people have actually ridden me right down the road and talking about calling Einstein an idiot and a moron, but I'll first point you to the fact that the person that actually invented the modern world, Nikola Tesla and others, they specifically called Einstein an idiot. So even if I never said Einstein was a moron, we still have Nikola Tesla who said that Einstein was a fool and an idiot and a beggar clad in purple robes who others thought was, genius, but was a moron. So there we have Nikola Tesla's view of Albert Einstein, in which he says Einstein's an idiot. Here we have Einstein saying, speaking of like wave particles or just light, here's Einstein on light. We are faced with a new kind of difficulty. We have two contradictory pictures of reality. Separately, the particle and the wave theory of light, neither of them fully explains the phenomenon of light, but together they do. Really? And he actually called this das Lichtwand. Yeah. The photon is a completely arbitrary concept. It has absolutely no basis in reality. None whatsoever. Let's get to that. But let's first give a quote from Nikola Tesla, April 8th, 1934, from the New York Times, no less. So this is a Nikola Tesla. There's something very frightening about the universe. We consider only our senses and our sound make it beautiful. The universe is darker than the darkest ink, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Let's get on to light. The false electromagnetic theory of light, advanced by Maxwell and subsequently experimentally investigated by Hertz, was so great that even now, although controverted, he means idiot, scientific minds are under its sway. So Nikola Tesla is basically saying everybody's a dumbass in as far as what they believe or understand what light is. This is Nikola Tesla, okay? This theory supposed the existence of a medium which was solid yet permitted bodies to pass through it without resistance. He's actually attacking false premises of ether. And there are many, many different views of the ether. Tesla, of course, supported the ether, but he did not support, misapprehensions of the medium, i.e. the ether. Yet, according to our conceptions of mechanical principles and ages of experience, such a medium was absolutely impossible. Light was wrongly considered to be such a phenomena bound up in that kind of medium. What then can light not be, if not a transverse vibration? I consider this topic extremely important. Light cannot be, are you listening closely, anything but a longitudinal, okay? Longitudinal, you know what that word means? Disturbance in the ether. Okay, this is Nikola Tesla talking. Okay, light cannot be anything but a longitudinal disturbance in the ether. This is Nikola Tesla, involving alternate compressions and rarefactions. Exactly what I said. Light can be nothing else than like a sound wave in the ether. In other words, he's actually saying that light is like, literally sound propagation. Obviously, nothing is reaching out of our mouths. We're causing a disturbance in the air, which is causing frequencies and harmonics to actually propagate, not through the medium, but of the medium. Now, here's the shit that you and the rest of the world don't understand. If you don't get anything out of this video other than this, let's talk about something here. Let's go back to what Walter Russell said, okay? Walter Russell said that light does not travel. There's no such thing as traveling light. He's absolutely right. If you think that a light bulb emits light, or a laser emits light, or the sun emits light, then you're an idiot. You're an absolute, undeniable idiot, but that's okay. Most other people are idiots too. If we have 95% of the world that believes in the same bullshit, it's not that you're an idiot, it's that you've been brainwashed. Well, the fact that humanity is not evolved, oh, that's such an arrogant statement. Well, it's the truth. Light doesn't have any speed, it's a rate of induction. Light is not propagating, here's the important point, light is not propagating through any medium, okay? It's not like we're throwing a spear through the water at a fish, right? Light is not propagating through the medium, i.e. the ether. Light is the propagation of the perturbation of that medium. What the hell does that mean? When you stick a guy in the middle of a pond, he starts flapping his arms. Are any of you stupid enough to believe that the guy is reaching his arms out to either shore? There's something of the guy being emitted to the other shore where the waves are lapping. He's splashing in the middle of the pond, right? Is the guy emitting anything? No, he's causing a perturbation in the medium, i.e. the waters that he's in. Do you think that your mouth is emitting anything when you actually talk? No, you're actually causing compressions at certain cycles per second, certain amplitude through the air, right? Right. This is what the fuck Walter Russell meant and Nikola Tesla meant when they said that light does not travel. That's what Walter Russell said. Nikola Tesla said the same thing. When Nikola Tesla said that there's nothing actually traveling through the air, what can light not be? I consider it extremely important. Light cannot be anything but a longitudinal disturbance of the ether. Okay? Light is not propagating. Light does not travel. The sun does not emit light. A light bulb is inside of a glass vacuum sealed. It's actually the air is sucked out and some argon is pumped in. Some actual LEDs and whatnot are completely not ones like these, but professional ones are actually vacuum sealed to make them last longer. Nothing is propagating outside of this LED or outside of a light bulb. Light isn't traveling. These things are not emitting light. Well, sure they are. I can see the light. It's traveling through the lens, and then it's hitting the back of the sensor and it's being recorded. No. These things are no different than actually crying out light or talking light. I'm talking. It's being transmitted as a perturbation in the air, which is hitting this microphone condenser, being recorded. The same thing is happening with light. Light is no different than sound. Well, we know that sound is propagating through the air. No, sound doesn't propagate through the air. You know, there's a speed of sound. No, there's not a speed of sound. It's a rate of induction. Sound has a rate of induction, which means the maximum traversable speed that is allowable. We know we have Doppler shift. Okay, I can discuss this for hours and hours and hours. Talk about Doppler shift. So we also have red shift and blue shift in light. You kind of know how Doppler shift, like, you know, as a car comes by, like an ambulance, you know that? Doppler shift, same shit exists with light. The only thing we have are two different mediums, okay? Medium of sound in the air. My mouth is not emitting anything. My mouth is setting up a perturbation of the air, meaning the air is doing this number, right? The sun, these LEDs, these things are not emitting light. If you think that these things are emitting light, you're an idiot. Humanity is not intellectually involved enough yet to understand what Walter Russell and Nikola Tesla said. You are not. We are not collectively. Some of us, however, are. Oh, God, that's so arrogant. God, you're an arrogant bastard. But am I right? But am I right? So do you understand that one statement? The most important crux to this, and if you understand nothing else, you better understand that light is not propagating through a medium. Light is the propagation of the medium, which has a maximum rate of induction, which we call the speed of light, except it's not a speed, it's a rate of induction. You got two mediums. Sound, the medium is the air. We obviously can't talk in outer space, right? There's no air, right? I can't hear anything, right? Out in space, right? Space, right? No air, nothing to vibrate. The ether is everywhere, obviously. You want to understand some really important stuff, something that science has never answered? Why, sure they've answered it. We know everything about optics. Oh, really, do we? Do we really? Let's get that to the second. Light is a field perturbation. It's a longitudinal propagating pulse perturbation with transverse electromagnetic divergent discharges. Light is a field perturbation. It's a longitudinal propagating pulse perturbation with transverse electromagnetic divergent discharges. You know, opposite to conventional phenomena, if you don't understand counter space, and Eric Dollard said this, and if Eric Dollard said nothing else of importance, the one thing he said that was really accurate, this guy's a genius, written several books, he's kind of like half madman. I've used to talk to him on the phone, he's a very intelligent guy. Calling him a madman is a bit of a compliment, because even he would say he's a madman. I love Eric Dollard. I mean, he's half crazy, kind of like me, but completely intelligent. One thing he said is that if you don't understand counter space, then you don't I'm going to paraphrase him, but this is basically what he meant, because he loves to cuss too, by the way. Let me tell you what, I've talked to Eric Dollard, loves to cuss, and that's okay by me. He basically said, if you don't understand counter space, you don't understand jack shit. You're never going to understand field theory. You kind of see this, how we have higher frequency here. Here we have lower frequency. You know, in conventional things, like a bigger a box, the more shit it could hold. Well, when it comes to field theory, the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance, you know? Smaller the space, higher the capacitance. So we move towards the blue end of the spectrum, shit gets dangerous. You know, want to know something else also interesting nobody's ever made mention of or nobody's ever noticed? Along the entire breadth of the electromagnetic spectrum. Do you know where visible light sits? Do you know where visible light sits on the electromagnetic spectrum? It sits right here. If this were the electromagnetic spectrum, it sits right here. Do you know what's on either side of visible light? Okay, visible light's right here. We have the near end here. We have the near end, and we have the far end over here. Light sits right here. Do you know where light sits on the electromagnetic spectrum? It sits right at the junction of, if you take the whole as 1, light sits at the ratio of phi to 1. On the entire electromagnetic spectrum, visible light It's all electromagnetism, right? Actually, it's technically, light is not merely electromagnetic. It is a circuit. It is a transverse coaxial circuit, okay? It's not merely electromagnetic transverse. I mean, that's like saying that, most people don't know what the hell a coax cable is. Like, everything's going on between the shielding. It's like, well, what's that center conductor there? Light is a coaxial circuit. Light sits, visible light, the shit that we see, sits right on the electromagnetic spectrum between phi and 1. In other words, if you take the entire electromagnetic spectrum and you divide it at a rate of phi to 1, light, visible light, sits right at the junction between phi to 1. Oh, how important is that? Golden ratio, golden section. Oh, go figure that one. Here's something else that science will never explain to you. You see, light, which of course is not a speed, it's a rate of induction. There's nothing inside light that can speed it back up again. It's kind of like if you hit your brakes on your car, you're going to have to apply gas or energy to speed that fucker back up, right? You go to a stoplight, you put on the brakes. To speed back up, you actually have to apply force, the release of energy, via the gas tank, right? Well, when light passes through glass, it speeds down by, 18% or something like that? It depends on the type of glass that it is. Now, science has never explained how light speeds back up again. When light passes through water, it slows down. When it passes through glass, it slows down. This is what causes chromatic aberration, too, by the way. And this is also why blue light goes wah, and red light does not do that. It does some get deflected as it's passing through glass, but nowhere near as much as higher capacitance glass. Okay, this would be like blue light, higher capacitance, lower capacitance. In other words, higher capacitance. By the way, glass is a capacitor. No, glass is an insulator. There's no such thing that is entirely a capacitor or entirely a resistor. Everything in the universe is capacitance, resistance, permeability, and permittivity. There's no such thing as a pure capacitor or a pure resistor or a pure insulator. Glass is also a fucking capacitor. No branch of science, let's start off with actually talking about the important thing. No branch of science has ever defined what the F a field is. They never can and they never will. Because everything is fields and fields are not particles. And all of current science is atomism. Okay, you know what that word is? Atomism. You don't know what the hell the word atomism means. You need to look it the fuck up. Because that's what all of modern science is atomism. Everything is a field and fields are not particles. The only thing science can't explain, not the only thing, science can't explain is why light will speed back up again to its prior rate of induction as it leaves the glass. Okay, it enters the glass and it slows down. As it leaves the glass, it speeds back up again. It doesn't speed back up again because there's nothing propagating through the glass. The glass is a resistor and a capacitor. It's an insulator. Well, light is electrical, bitches. How the hell do you think solar cells work? Glass is also a capacitor. If you don't believe me, just type in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the dissectable capacitor, where they show you that glass is a fucking capacitor, okay? In a camera lens, there's a lot of glass. All that glass is a capacitor. That's why lenses that have a shitload of glass in them, that's why they have poor microcontrast. Poor microcontrast are the intertonal details that are lost after it passes through a crap load of glass in, say, a 22-element lens, okay? So science can never explain that. There's nothing with inside light that's going, we need to release more energy. We're going to speed back up again. Because people think that light is something propagating. Light is not something propagating. Light is the propagation of the perturbation of the medium itself, Our mouths are not emitting anything. They're causing a perturbation in the air. A light bulb is not fucking emitting anything. It is a perturbation in the air. Oh, except not that air. We're talking about the ether. We're talking about the universal medium that is anywhere and everywhere. But it is nowhere. Inertia has no Cartesian coordinate. What does that mean? Oh, I could talk about this for days and days and days, and people still wouldn't get it. I'd be perfectly logical, straight down the board. People are like, I still don't get it. It's like, good. You might never get it. Red shift and blue shift, for example, prove that light is a rate of induction moving towards blue shift. Higher capacitance, which equals less electromagnetic retardation. That's technically what it's called, too. EMR, electromagnetic retardation. Look it up. Dr. Oleg D. Jeffimenko, huge-ass book with all the math in the world. Got 2 PhDs. He's dead now. Rest his soul. Oh, Maria Patris in Filii Spiritus Sancti, just joking about that part. PhD, wrote a huge book on that topic. Speed and phase, they're all rates of induction. The wave-particle duality does not exist. We think that light is something that's moving through something else. It's not. It's a field perturbation. A field of what? We're talking about the field. There is only one field. We think that electricity is one thing, and gravity is another thing, and magnetism another. Human race is so effing brain dead. We actually think that these things are different shit. Like, you know, it is as stupid to think that electricity is one thing and gravity is another thing and magnetism. It is stupid to believe that as it is to be mentally brain dead and think that water is one thing, steam is another thing, and ice is another. Well, we got water here and steam here and ice here, and there's 3 different things. It's like, no, asshole, they're all water. Light is not a particle. The notion of a photon particle has no basis in reality. Absolutely fucking none. The notion of a das Lichtquant, or the particle, the light quanta, das Lichtquant, is a complete fabrication. It is a human conceptual reification of something due to the misapprehension of the nature of light. Pulse perturbations, okay? Well, you know what? When we have a pulse of light, it's kind of like a particle, so we're going to call that shit a photon. Maybe after a long day of shooting with my camera, I need to empty the camera out because, you know, it's full of photons. I mean, you know, only stupid humanity could come up with this bullshit. Photon particles. Give me a break. Like light speeding back up again, you're never going to explain that shit. Because your premise is that light is something that's propagating. And you're never going to explain it via that. Because it's impossible. Because it's an unreality like unicorns and leprechauns. The shit doesn't exist. Wise up! This is a video I think everybody should watch, especially even little kids. This is how ignorant humanity is. Now, in the past, including the ancient Greeks, Plato talked about the ether, and of course there were 1,000 different theories of the ether, many of which are wrong, just as there were throughout history 1,000 different theories on the human soul. The ancient Jains thought that the soul was atomistic and that it was actually a type of particle. And of course, you know, the refutation of various illogical and absurd theories upon something is not a negation or refutation of something, just as, for example, the Michelson-Morley experiment, which presumed to be an experiment on either the confirmation or the denial of the existence of the ether, was certainly no denial of same, yet modern science, quote-unquote, seems to rely upon that as a proof that the ether doesn't exist. Yet, very simply, humanity is still, as it's always been throughout history, incredibly ignorant. I mean, insanely ignorant. Every branch of field theory, which dates all the way back to Pythagoras and surely before them, has always thought that they were right, and later on, they're always proven to be wrong. Now there's a current branch of science that is based upon particlism. It thinks that all interactions can be quantified, i.e. quantity, i.e. materialistic, i.e. atomistic, that there must be something there. And to make their equations balance out, they use something that has absolutely no basis in reality. Well, I should say it has as much basis in reality as unicorns and leprechauns, meaning none whatsoever. And they admit that these virtual photons have no basis in reality other than to make their equations balance out. There's absolutely 0.000% proof of the existence of this nonsense, none whatsoever, and they use this to form the basis of their atomist theory, because You cannot quantify a field. Quantity, quantum. The entire basis of the notion of a wave-particle duality is nothing other than a statement of ignorance. Like 5 blind men groping an elephant. You know, one's groping the tail and he's telling you, oh, this is a type of snake. The other one is groping the chest of the elephant. Oh, this is like a barrel. It's like a hippopotamus. And the other one's grasping the big flappy ears, and he says it's like a skate or a manta ray. And of course, you know, none of them have any of the picture. They have no idea what the hell an elephant is because they're all groping different parts. So the notion of a wave-particle duality has absolutely no basis in reality whatsoever. The nature of light is really very simple. Mother Nature doesn't have a calculator. And if she actually existed, she'd be laughing at humanity and how ignorant we are. We think we're so advanced because we have TV sets and iPods and iPads, and you know, we have all these technological advancements and an International Space Station.
And you're weightless. That was great.
But none of that means anything. It doesn't mean that we have a grasp on cosmic mechanics. The notion of field deviation cannot be quantified by anybody on this earth because you cannot quantify something which has no quantity. Everything in the universe is fields, and fields are not particles. You cannot quantize them. So getting to the point, what exactly is the premise of the affirmation of the ether? Forgetting about all the thousands of different pontifications on the nature of the ether, it has to be said unequivocally that the ether does exist. And every proof around you is an example of the ether. Now, we're brought up believing that when you turn on the light bulb, it emits light. Well, it doesn't emit light, nor does the sun emit light. It's like saying a person out in the middle of a pond that's flapping his arms is actually reaching out and touching you. Well, if you mean by proxy, by way of the perturbations of him flapping in his arms in the middle of the pond, that he creates waves of compressions and rarefactions in the pond, and those waves lap at your feet on the edge of the pond, you can say, well, that person is emitting pressure, so he's emitting something, you know, just like this light bulb, like there's a little person inside this light bulb. When you pass a AC or DC current through it, depending on what sort of light it is, that it's emitting light. But this is a vacuum tube. There's nothing escaping out of here. If I were to plug this in the deep vacuum of space, what do you think is actually being emitted? You know, light is neither a wave nor is it a particle. It is a coaxial circuit of longitudinal compressions and rarefactions and transverse electrical and magnetic divergences. There's only one field ultimately, and that is dielectric. And it's longitudinal. And since it has no transverse component, it cannot be quantified in any shape or form with a time component. This is why Tesla and Eric Dollard and others have proven that faster than light transmissions are provable. Tesla proved it, Dollard proved it. There's even some videos on YouTube. One guy does an experiment with Tesla coils where he sends a transmission at 1.39 something the speed of light, because the speed of light is not a speed, it's a rate of induction. It's the maximum rate of induction of anything that has transverse electrical and or magnetic or electromagnetic components. So a light bulb doesn't emit light. It sets up a field perturbation. And you can say by proxy, well, a light bulb is emitting light. Well, how stupid does that sound? How come humanity is so ignorant? Now, well, answering that, of course, would take 1,000 hours, if not more. Take, for example, this monster magnet. Now, based upon my equation and every known equation of field divergence of a magnet and the Gaussian flux that exists at various levels, we can state, without taking into account for a time component, that this field exists basically as a bubble about yay far. Okay, that is the pressure dynamics at which it exists. Actually, since this neodymium iron boron is a few years old, it's actually starting the centrifugal divergence. It's hard to show you this because it's monstrously dangerous. You can actually see that there's a 1-inch gap around either side here of a discoloration where the centrifugal divergence has actually affected the chromium plating on this monstrously dangerous magnet. It also hurts my eyes being this close to it after a few minutes. So why don't you ask, this is just a tiny 2-millimeter ball magnet. And I'm going to place it in the center. You'd think, well, it'd want to stay in the center of this magnet. I've demonstrated this before. I mean, this is just taped to a piece of rope. It's easier to demonstrate this on a huge magnet than a tiny one, because on a tiny one it's really pretty hard to see. Well, you think it doesn't make any difference what side it is, okay? It'll still do the exact same thing. Why I want the magnet to stay right here, because this is magnetic attraction, which of course there's no such thing as magnetic attraction, is dielectric acceleration. Well, no, it won't. It'll always shoot to the edge like there's this invisible force that's actually pushing it to the edge like a pressure wave. And that's exactly right. The same reason this little ball magnet, which is a 2-millimeter neodymium magnet, this is a huge monster, $1,000 neodymium. It's the largest permanent magnet that money can buy. The same reason this little sucker goes all the way to the centrifugal divergent edge and will not stay at the centripetal convergent center here. You see, even holding it like this, you'll see that it immediately wants to jump to the edge. There's no way I can get it on either side. Doesn't make any difference, or either side of the bead magnet. No, always the centrifugal. Why do you think that occurs? There's not one single book in this entire world will give you an explanation of centrifugal and centripetal divergence and convergence. This I can show you with a ferrocell, but I made like 200 videos already with a ferrocell of why there is a toroidal divergent formation around this magnet and a centripetal convergent. Actually, the ferrocell will look like a black hole right here at the center of this magnet. The same reason this neodymium iron boron will always go to the edge of this magnet is also the same reason why the universe's most diamagnetic material is the bismuth sphere that I cast will only want to stay towards the center of this magnet. It likes staying here. If you actually hover it over this, you'll actually find a dip right here in the center. When you actually drag it over the top of this magnet, it will feel like a dip is occurring right here, then a trough here, and then a dip here. Because this has the universe's highest level of, actually it's kind of hard to say this way, it has the highest level of lowest magnetic permeability. So the magnetic permeability of this elemental bismuth, which is all bismuth by the way, is depleted neptunium, just as basically all the world's lead is depleted uranium. It wants to sit here in the center for the same reason this magnet will always only jump towards the centrifugal divergent edge. Now, it is the case that knowing the field dynamics of Gaussian flux, that there should be a pressure toroidal bubble around this magnet of about yay far on either side. Okay, so we got basically like this. Now, I've shown in a prior video many months ago how I can take this sucker and turn on a cathode ray tube. Now, we know that it's only escaping out about yay far. I can take a cathode ray tube, i.e. a television set, the old type. I can actually influence it at a distance of 23 feet or more, actually. It's just harder to see at that distance. I can actually take this with the cathode ray tube, and the cathode ray tube will be affected way the hell on the other side of the house. Wah, wah. Literally. Now, if we have a sphere of influence about yay far of magnetic divergence that is, now the Gauss meters are really sensitive too, by the way. What do you think is influencing that cathode ray tube at about 20 times the distance that this magnet should be influencing? I don't like to get my face this close to this magnet. This magnet is dangerous. Oh my God, it's dangerous. It actually hurts your eyes due to the chromotomes here, because it is no different than a person in the water, middle of a pond. When you actually turn this, you're actually creating a ether pressure flux within the ether that is actually like sending waves out. You say to someone in the middle of the lake, start flapping your arms wildly. And of course waves start to emanate. They're pressure waves in the ether. Now, if I were able to be in the deepest, darkest pits of outer space and do this and have a cathode ray tube or some other device that could show influence, at even further distances, which is certainly far more sensitive to make than a cathode ray tube, I could put it at like 100 feet, and I could bring up this magnet and start to turn it a little bit, and I'd create pressure, rarefactions, and compressions and rarefactions in the ether. Wah, wah. I mean, you would still see it. And people tell us that there's no ether. What do you think is reaching out there? You cannot quantize a field. Fields have no quantity. There is nothing there. There's certainly no virtual particles. To say virtual particles is like saying God or unicorns or leprechauns or reaching out at far-flung distances. I tell people, well, denote a field for me. What do you mean denote a field? I said, just tell me what a field is. Well, a field is a flux over a given... That's the description. That's not an explanation. Give me a definition. A definition would require quantization. Quantity. You would actually have to give some sort of objective quantification for what a field is. Can't do it. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like saying, well, this light bulb emits light, this high-powered flashlight. It's not emitting anything. This is a vacuum-sealed light bulb. I mean, a vacuum-sealed flashlight. This is a vacuum-sealed tube. What do you think it's emitting? It's going through the glass. What do you think it's emitting? This light bulb isn't emitting anything any more so than this magnet is emitting anything. It's field pressures. Field pressures. Everything works off two things. Mother Nature is really simple, and that old broad doesn't have a calculator. Okay? And she doesn't believe in quantum. She only knows two things, divergent convergence. Everything in the universe is centrifugal divergence or centripetal convergence. Force and motion and inertia and acceleration govern the entire universe, from macro to micro. What do you think? I just asked someone, not given a time variable. This is just a sheet of copper, right? Okay, boom. What do you think? Just ask them, well, this is an eddy current. Well, that's a description, not an explanation. I can get a description from a 5-year-old child. Tell me what this is, huh? Oh, well, that is an eddy current due to the dielectric reflectivity of the copper plate as it's dropping over the very strong Gaussian magnetic. That's a description again, not an explanation. I can get a description from a 5-year-old. However, these people that are paid billions of dollars to build particle colliders in Europe and think that they're discovering these mystical unicorn particles, I mean, there's not evidence, there's no evidence for any of that. They're actually seeing electromagnetic and dielectric flux paths that are occurring at the breakup of atomic particles. Everything in the universe is fields. You're seeing field track modalities that occur at various electrovolts and microelectrovolts that are appearing on a screen as they're causing atomic collisions. What do you think the universe is? Do you think that, that there are virtual... This is their basis for explaining magnetism, because there is no quantity that is being emitted here off the face of this magnet. Nothing. There is no quantity there. Now, you can refute, and so can I, 100 different ether theories. And there are thousands of ether theories over the years. But the ether remains nonetheless. I mean, it's like a fish swimming in water trying to deny that there's water. Us stupid humans think that there's no such thing as the ether. Well, yeah, there is such a thing as ether. I don't care what you call it. Technically, ether is no different than inertia. And when you actually release that inertia and you cause pressure modalities to exist, you cause compressions and rarefactions, just like turning on a light bulb, you're converting one form of electrical power into another. As Eric Dollard once said, and I think it's one of his most brilliant statements, is that you look at the AC power lines that are going down the street, and there is as much power there as a giant locomotive, and there's no quantity that is actually passing down through those AC lines. You could take mechanical force at one end, and you could turn it into a field pressure modality that exists down the AC current lines, and then and turn that back in again to a mechanical motion. I mean, if someone were to understand that you could take a hydroelectric motor the size of this house, let's say at the Hoover Dam, and then take that AC current and drop it through power lines where nothing is visible at all. I mean, that's current. Well, it's not electrons flowing through there like squeezing out toothpaste. It is field pressures. Doesn't matter if it's AC current or DC current. You could take enormous mechanical energy, transfer that into AC or DC current, passing down through a large set of 2-inch wires, 1,000 miles away, and turn that back again into mechanical force and motion. I mean, nobody ever thinks about stuff like that. I mean, how does that work? Well, we got electrical engineers. Well, I tell you what, the electrical engineers, the geniuses that gave you Einstein didn't give you any of this crap that is lighting my ugly face right now. Nikola Tesla, Charles Proteus Steinmetz, Faraday, Oliver Heaviside. These are the people that gave you 100% of the world's electrical grid and everything your computer and all your crap was running off of. And they all knew that the ether exists. Charles Proteus Steinmetz would talk about a busy day in the lab of churning up the ether. These people all knew that the ether existed, just as anybody with half a brain, and really, the world basically doesn't have anybody with 1/10 of a brain, knows that ultimately that this light bulb isn't emitting a damn thing. It is setting up a field pressure compression and rarefaction. Okay, this is a field perturbation. The same thing with a magnet, that I could turn it on its side. And the Gaussian flux only reaches out about yay far, so how is it affecting a cathode ray tube at 30 feet away? That's the ether, baby, like someone flapping their arms in the middle of a pond. This is the arm length of someone in the pond. It's about 4 feet or so, or whatever the hell it is. You could have ape arms, maybe a little bit longer. You think he's reaching someone at the other shore? He's actually reaching out like 100 feet to the other shore? No, he's actually flapping his waves in the water, and he's sending out waves that are affecting other things. There's nothing emitted by this magnet, any more so than there's anything being emitted by this stupid light bulb. Now, why don't you ask yourself, what is magnetic permeability? What is dielectric permittivity? Everything in the universe is force and motion and inertia and acceleration. And I'll damn well tell you that nobody on this earth can quantize the field for you. They can give it qualities over a given period of time, but you cannot quantize it because it is absolutely impossible to quantize the field, because there is no quantity that makes up a field. Okay? This is very simple, and it's undeniable by anybody. I don't care if they are a professor or a PhD. All you have to do is just say, quantize the field for me. Can't do it. They'll sit there and drool on themselves, or they'll pretend to know what the hell they're talking about, but they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Nobody can quantize the field for you. And the entire universe is fields, and fields are not particles. Mother Nature doesn't believe in any of this crap. She's really, 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 really simple. Okay? I've been asked countless times to explain the greatest mystery of the universe so simply that it could fit into a child's book. Unfortunately, as is the case, what is most simple in the universe is not simplex to explain. What magnetism is, obviously, is that which props up and gives volume to 100% of the cosmos ethithos, or the phenomenal universe, be it on the macro scale or on the micro scale. 100% of the volume of any atom, whatever that may be, from hydrogen all the way through, uranium and plutonium and further on, is propped up by magnetism. That which gives definitional volume to the entire universe is unquestionably so magnetism. So what is magnetism? Faraday said that magnetism was the dielectric field. Alas and unfortunately, he was the last person to ever get close to what magnetism was. Tesla himself never denotated what magnetism was. I made a discovery a few years ago, a formula for uncovering what magnetism was, and I've been trying to prove myself wrong ever since, including inquiring some of the finest minds on magnetism, and no one has been able to refute this. All models of magnetism, including the Lamore frequency of geomagnetic precession, all confirm my discovery. As I found out later, an invention called the ferrocell, invented by a friend of mine now named Tim Vanderelli, a very, very simplex device, proves this. Mother Nature is extremely simple, and denotatively everything is reducible to force and motion and inertia and acceleration. Let me give you an illustration of what magnetism is. At first you will find it very complex, but if you're able to imagine it in your mind and understand non-Euclidean geometry and projective geometry, you will understand what magnetism is. Let's first take a look at this very simplex illustration. Now, this is a hypertrochoid. Most people would consider it to be a spirograph pattern. But how is this actually extrapolated? The loss of inertia denotates spatial divergence, not into space, but as creating space. Now, let me first show you a simplex extrapolation here. Let me clear that out since this is hard to draw on a computer. Okay, now as I diverge from the non-Euclidean point, I have inverse projection along entire circumference of the non-Euclidean point. This would be the dielectric point. You have to imagine this in 3 dimensions. Since magnetism is a reciprocating precessional hyperboloid, magnetism is a reciprocating precessional hyperboloid. Now let's actually extrapolate out magnetism in full. As it's tough to draw on a computer, you'll have to imagine this in perfection. Okay. Now we're going to have to create, there we go. Now we have the centrifugal and the centripetal point of divergence and convergence. Of a magnet. This actually extrapolates out the linear boundary of the physical magnet. Now, what denotates a magnet is nothing other than field coherency. You talk about aligned domains, and obviously this is well known, but the explanation for same is what defines field coherency versus inchoate field coherency, i.e. Respective to aligned domains versus non-aligned domains, or inchoate field coherency, isn't understood. Now, here's the hypertrochoidal pattern. As is necessarily the case, magnetism is a reciprocating precessional hyperboloid. Now, superficially, this seems extremely complex, but first we have to understand a premise in limited human understanding as far as Mother Nature. I'm trying to make this really simple, and unfortunately, in trying to explain things very simple, things become rather hard. Now, this is how a human being draws a line. Now, bear with me. This is how a human being draws a line. We start at a point, and we end with a line, no matter what direction we go in. Now, there's no such thing as a point, and there's no such thing as a line. For me to make a point, I first have to make a line to start a point, and I cannot make a line without a point. Reductively so in field theory, there's no such thing as a point or a line. There is only a point line. Now, this is how a human extrapolates out a line, but Mother Nature does not make lines this way. This would be the non-Euclidean point, for lack of a better term, of Mother Nature. But Mother Nature only makes lines like this. This is the point of inertia, and these two inverse points are the point of divergence. This is the only line that Mother Nature knows. For every action, there is equal opposite reaction. We all know that retroductively is the case, necessitatively so. So this is the only line that Mother Nature knows. But there are no straight lines in the universe. Everything is curvilinear. Absolutely everything in the universe is curvilinear. There is no exception to this. This is necessitatively the extrapolation of magnetism, the reciprocating precessional hyperboloid. Bear with me for a second, and I will help you understand this. This is the ferrocell. I made a discovery on the nature of the extrapolation of magnetism. This is one of my formulas. And the other one involves the Lamour frequency of geomagnetic precession. Here's the 42.5 degree precession in Teslas of a geomagnetic precession, which oddly enough, well, it's not odd, occurs at a ratio of 1 to 5. This formula is my discovery for the extrapolation of any magnetic force given perfect even Gaussian flux density throughout the object. And over here you can actually see, and this is a weak resolution, that's why it's so dim, and these little white spots are just dust spots on the ferrocell. But this is actually what magnetism looks like. Now I'm going to show you a high class image here as I scroll down. Also, these are interference patterns between 4 different magnets of the Gaussian flux. And here is, of course, the center is black because that is the point of magnetic convergence. Here you can actually see a disk magnet edge on and the bowl-shaped formation. And I'll show you, here is also a proof of something I knew that had to exist. It is electromagnetic retardation that exists at a ratio of 1 over 5 to the power of -3. Here we have 5 to the power of -3 plus 1, so you have 1.23606. 1, 1, and 1, so you have 5.23606. Necessitative electromagnetic retardation, the Lamour frequency of geomagnetic precession that must, under Gaussian flux density, reciprocate itself out as that formula, as I predicted. Let me get you down here to a better image. Here we go. Here's a much better one, taken by Michael Snyder, who's a professor at Louisville. Yeah, the ferrocell is very clear. Now these, he used multiple colored LEDs. It doesn't matter if you use multiple colored LEDs or not. Here you can see his hand actually is holding the magnet behind the, you can see books behind here. Now, like I said, these cemented lenses are not projecting anything other than the magnetism, the divergent centrifugal magnetism that is being emitted by the magnet. These LEDs are just dumb LEDs like you would use for Christmas decorations, okay? It could be white or it could be multicolored to give you a better sense of depth, but it doesn't matter if they're all white or multicolor, but here you can actually see the hypertrochoidal formation, the spirograph pattern. Some people go, oh, that looks like a dream catcher, which of course it does. Here's a closer image. You can actually see the hypertrochoidal pattern. It's like simplex fluid dynamics. That's the only way that magnetism can extrapolate itself. Now here are 2 magnets intersecting. You can see the flux density and the point at which these are repelling each other and the fields are diverging away from each other as these like polarity magnets are being pushed together. The hard part people have is actually grasping in their mind what is a reciprocating precessional hyperboloid and how does that define magnetism. You know, it's so incredibly simplex, and I have a perfect picture of it in my head, but explaining it to people is rather hard. Also, you have equal Gaussian flux density on either quote-unquote pole of a magnet, but you also have electromagnetic retardation, which is rarefied on the north pole and compressed on the south. Now, here's something you'll find interesting. This is a real picture. You can actually see the used book behind here. This is a cube magnet, and here's one pole of the magnet, and here's the other. So you're actually looking at the edge of the magnet, and as you look closely, you can actually see, some people say, oh, well, it looks like a black hole. Of course, no one's ever seen a black hole, but you can actually see, or like a toilet bowl. I mean, an empty void. It's actually bowl-shaped. On either side. What you're actually seeing right here is a dielectric inertial plane. You see this bright yellow line right here? This is the dielectric inertial plane of non-Euclidean zero divergence, i.e. highest inertia. Right here is a dielectric inertial plane. You see this bright yellow line right here? This is the dielectric inertial plane of non-Euclidean zero divergence, i.e. highest inertia. Field dynamics are irreducibly very simple, but humanity doesn't understand them yet. But this is what magnetism truly looks like. It is being painted by light. Now, if you're actually able to hold one of these ferrocells in your hand, you would actually see a hair over, depends on the magnet, a hair over 4 inches of depth. So imagine the best hologram you've ever seen in the world. Most people have never seen a true art hologram. Imagine the best hologram in the world and multiply that times 100. That is the holographic projection that is emitted through this thin layer is a ferrofluidic oil suspension. It is less than 1 micron thin. That is insanely thin. And to get 3 to 4 inches of holographic projection is absolutely extraordinary. Magnetism truly is a two-dimensional projection of the loss of inertia. Not into space, because nothing goes in, no field goes into space. Space is the after effect of the loss of inertia, i.e. the dielectric field. Now this is a very interesting image. What this is a broken ring magnet. You see the broken piece right here, it's missing. Here is how the field, the Gaussian field density is being painted by light through that micron thin layer on this broken ring magnet. These are real images. These are not computer generated. These are completely real images. Now here's the discovery that I made that I actually predicted would occur. And I went looking for it by using RGB LEDs, and I'll explain that in the next video and what this means. But you're seeing for the first time, you know, what magnetism truly is. And if your mind is spinning, you know, I'll try to make it even more simple, but this is as simple as I can make it. And it really is ultimately simple, but it is hard to explain, okay? Hey, check it out. I don't even need a black backing on this new cell design. It's completely transparent, as you can see. So let's take this cube magnet and place it here. Whoa. Check out the colors. So let me turn it this way. That way you can see the plane of inertia like that. Ooh, whoa. I don't even have a backing on it. Let's flip it over, and then I'll show you the ring magnet. Oops. Stuff sticking to my hand. Let me zoom in a little closer here. You tell these are RGB LEDs. Now, let's place the ring magnet underneath it, but only for a few seconds because it's sensitive. Position it properly here. Look at that. Is that the shiz or is that the shiz? Let me zoom in a little bit. And then get down on it, like at a steeper angle. Whoa. Whoa! I need to move it around. Otherwise, you see it leaves little marks on there. Because it's really sensitive. Check that out. Completely transparent. There's nothing in this other than a few nanometers of liquid, basically like a half a drop of liquid ring with RGB LEDs and a special liquid formulation between the cell. Is that cool or is that cool? Let me zoom out and get better perspective. A steep angle. Watch it form instantly. You see the holographic nature of it? The only thing that's special about a ring magnet, as I stated in the lecture, is that a ring magnet has the exact same geometry as magnetism itself, which is a torus, i.e. a donut. Let me zoom in a little bit better and do that again. Whoa, huh? Now let's put the, this is just black construction paper. I'm going to lay on the bottom here to give better contrast, since the field obviously penetrates everything. So we actually have better contrast with the black construction paper backing. But you're not actually, you can't see the magnet because it's being blocked by the black construction paper. You see how this ring magnet, unlike any other magnet, will leave burn-in images in the cell. These will eventually work their way out. But let's do that again straight overhead. Let's zoom in. Focus. Right, focus. Take that, girlfriend. Whoa. Whoa. Neat. Oh yeah. Very neat. Oh yeah, I'm doing some work here. I'm gonna make a couple cells. Got some glass here. A couple supercells. Check that out. Let me put the regular cube magnet back underneath there and finish out. It's hard. I'm balancing this whole cell on top of the ring, on top of the cube magnet, and then along the plane of inertia. Focus. There we go. Peace out, Girl Scouts. If you like these videos, click the link below. The lecture is all full up for next week, so thanks for watching. Boy, I love making things simple rather than complicated. Love it. Let's go over one fact that is undeniable. Every branch of science or so-called science throughout history has done one thing consistently, always and in all ways. They've always thought that their crap is accurate. Every single branch of physics, today, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200, 300, it's all the same. They've all thought their crap was accurate, and they've always been proven wrong. Absolutely every time. Do you think anybody understands what magnetism is or how a magnet works? Nope. Well, one person does. I do. I've spent many, many years on it, and I've finally figured it out, and it's irrefutable. I'll stake my life on it, and I'll debate it in front of anybody on the face of this planet. How does modern general relativity and quantum mechanics explain magnetism? Well, let's quote Richard Feynman. He's got a very famous video where he sits and squirms and wiggles and squirms in his chair. Like you've asked him, how many skeletons he's got in his basement. And he says, well, it's too complicated for me to explain to you. However, he does explain it. He actually doesn't explain it. In his book, QED's Strange Theory of Light and Matter. And the current scientific explanation for instantaneous action at a distance, i.e. magnetism, i.e. how a field operates, is virtual particles. Well, what's a virtual particle? Well, they don't exist. They're not the inputs or outputs of any experimentation, and they themselves will admit, quote-unquote, virtual particles are created to balance out equations. Why? That's no different than saying unicorns are leprechauns, or that which mediates fields and magnetism. It's ridiculous. They've also reified space. Let's quote Nikola Tesla on Einstein. Einstein is a beggar wrapped in purple robes whom ignorant folks take for the king. The theory, he said, these theories are wrapped in errors and fallacies, like clothes in a magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. This theory of relativity is like a beggar in purple clothes who the ignorant people take for a king. To say that in the presence of large bodies, space becomes curved is equivalent to stating that something can act upon nothing. Since action and reaction are coexistence, it follows that the supposed curvature of space, a la Einstein, is absolutely impossible. He goes on and on. He says of the theory of relativity, it's a mass of errors and deceptive ideas violently opposed to the great teaching of men of science of the past and even to common sense. Too bad, Sir Isaac, this is a poem that Tesla wrote. Too bad, Sir Isaac Newton, they dimmed your renown and turned your great science upside down. Now a long-haired crank, Einstein by name, put your high teachings to blame. He says that matter and force are transmutable, and wrong are the laws that you taught. I am much too ignorant, my son, for grasping at such crazy schemes so finely spun. My conclusions differ from Einstein's to the extent that they disprove Einstein's theory. My explanations of natural phenomena are not so involved as his. They are simpler, and when I'm ready to make a full announcement, it will be seen that I have proven my conclusions. I want to talk about the two things really quickly that scares the living piss. All you have to do is run across the best minds in general relativity, quantum mechanics, and all you have to do is ask them about two things, and they will stutter and piss themselves and scratch their ass and stammer, or they'll give you some sort of BS response to dazzle you like throwing glitter in your eyeballs. Just ask them what one or two things are. Ask them to denote them, in other words, define them. They cannot. They never will. Instantaneous action at a distance and the word field, or in Greek, koros. They can't do it. Why? Because quantum mechanics and general relativity is nothing different than ancient Greek atomism. The premise is that the entire universe is a bunch of rolling microscopic BBs, most of which are invisible, and it's just like a rain stick. There's nothing but a bunch of rolling particles around, subatomic and otherwise, and everything is mediated by particles. But they know that's not true ultimately, because they know that fields are particle-free, and that if things are particles in instantaneous action at a distance, which we know does occur, obviously, has nothing to do with particles, because obviously they'll be traveling faster than light, and according to GR and QM, nothing can travel faster than light. Oh, well, they've got a magical unicorn explanation for that. They got time-traveling particles and all. Their premise is that Mother Nature is an insane crack whore. Okay? That is the premise, irreducibly so, that quantum mechanics and general relativity forward is that Mother Nature is an insane crack whore. They have absolutely no empirical data to prove anything regarding general relativity or quantum mechanics as regards the denotation or even the connotation of the word field. They cannot denote the word field. It is impossible for them. Nobody has ever defined field. I'm actually working on the book for the term field. It's just so simplex. So let's look at their explanation. In physics, a field is a physical quantity. It is? No, it isn't. There's no physicality to field. There's no physicality to magnetism. That's nonsense. That has a value for every point in space and time. Space and time are not points. Space and time. Time is a qualifier of the movement between bodies. Time is a qualifier, a post-attributional quality of space. And space itself, by the way, there are no fields that terminate in space. Space cannot be a terminus for anything. Space is neither a field nor a force. It, just as Tesla said, can act on Tesla didn't say these exact words, they're my words. Space can act on nothing, and it does nothing. It has no attributes. That does quote Tesla, however. For example, on a weather map, a surface velocity is described as a vector on a map. Each vector represents a field or movement at that point. An electric field can be thought of as a condition in space. Space can have no conditions. Space is the attributional after effect of the loss of inertia. I'll show it to you really simple here in a second. It's just so simple. You've got two premises. You can believe general relativity and quantum mechanics, for which they have no empirical evidence whatsoever, or you can understand that Mother Nature, just to use the term loosely, is extremely simplex and divine. As I said, every branch of science has never deferred from the fact that they've always thought that their crap was right, and every time, they've always been proven wrong. You want to know the other big secret of general relativity? The one word that they hate the most. Now, they can never define instantaneous action at a distance or field. Never. Never. But the one word that they hate most and yet still use is this one, ether. The Michelson-Morley experiment never disproved ether, by the way. Never. Absolutely. General relativity and quantum mechanics still use this, but they are unable to use this. This is like some stupid redneck from the 30s coming into the future and throwing around the N-word. In general relativity and quantum mechanics, this is like some stupid redneck blurting out the N-word. Okay, just pure and simple as an analogy. You use the word ether amongst these mental midget scumbags of pseudoscience and their virtual particles. You say ether, everybody turns their head around and goes, what? Yet they still use this. All they've done is renamed it. You know what they're calling it now? There's a few different things they're calling it. The favorite phrase now, because they know that fields and instantaneous action and distance have nothing to do with particles. And of course they will admit that 70% of the universe is a big unknown to them, yet they've still particularized it by calling it DM, dark matter, i.e. particles. Well, we don't know what it is, we're just calling it dark matter. We don't know what it is, well, that's what we're going to call it. But here's what they call the ether now, because they know that none of their models can work without the ether, but they can't use the word ether, because that is the giant, excuse my analogy, the giant N-word. You know, it's just like, oh my God, you didn't say that word, did you? No, I don't use that word. I'm just using it analogously, okay? They're calling it this. This is what the assholes of general relativity have replaced for the word ether. Quantum fluid. That's the new magic term for ether. We can't say ether anymore, so we're going to say quantum fluid. Quantum. This is nothing other than a cover word for ether. Instantaneous action in fields are particle free. There are no particles in a field. Even the morons of general relativity and quantum mechanics know this for a fact. They're idiots. Just huge, demented scumbag. They have denoted magnetism as being mediated out by virtual particles. There is no quantitative difference between saying virtual particles, which have never been observable outputs or inputs of any experiment. It is a total phantasm created in the minds of these atomistic idiots. It doesn't exist. There's no difference between saying that and unicorns and leprechauns are what causes and mediates and controls. There's no difference. No quantitative difference whatsoever. They'll go on to say, well, a field can be classified as a scalar field of... There is never an explanation from anybody. The way you scare the piss knot out of anybody that thinks that they understand science, a la field theory, is just to ask them about instantaneous action at a distance and ask them to define the word field. Say, since fields are particle-free, define the word field. They won't. They'll say, well, field is like a region of an influence of what? Space. Well, space is neither a force. Okay? It can't act on anything. Space is neither a force nor a field. It can't act on anything. You can't reify one with the other. It doesn't work. It's absolutely impossible. By the way, what's the easiest way to describe what the earliest AC generators were? Here we have a magnet. Doesn't matter which pole it is. Here we have the DIP, the dielectric inertial plane. We have magnetic reciprocation north to south. We obviously have a necessitated rarefaction and compression. Dielectric inertial plane is in the middle. You know what a dielectric reflector is? Well, it's a copper coil. So what's an AC generator in essence? The most simplex variety. with a spinning magnet in the center, and we have a coil here. Let's just call this a one-phase coil. What's the simplest explanation of what an AC motor is in its earliest variety? It is nothing other than an inverted magnet. Here we have the centrifugal divergent magnetism moving in space and time, which necessitates phase induction of the dielectric inertial plane. Remember, copper, any sort of coil, is a dielectric reflector, okay? So here you have an inverse magnet. Here we have the dielectric inertial plane and a natural magnet in the center. Over here we have the dielectric inertial plane on the outside. Here we have the reciprocating magnetism, i.e. the force and motion. We have force and motion going on in the magnet, but it's also varied in respect to time, because we know that an AC generator, we're spinning the magnet inside the copper coil. This is a really simplex AC generator, okay? Real simplex power generator, okay? And here we have the dielectric reflector, copper coil. The only thing an AC motor is versus a magnet is an inverted magnet, an inside-out magnet. It is that simple. Oh my God, I wish someone told me this 20 years ago. What is an AC motor? Why, it's an inside-out magnet. All you have to do is vary the reciprocating phased centrifugal divergent magnetism with respect to time. Just hook a drive shaft right here, hook it up to turning water or, a wind, whatever. Vary it with respect to time, closely against the dielectric reflector, i.e. a copper coil, and you have power generation. Okay? That's simple. Now, I could tell you something about what you could do to magnets using compression, but that's for another video. Anyway, check for part 2. I'm going to talk about inertia versus force and motion. Oh my God, Mother Nature is so simple. I made a lot of videos on the denotation of what the term polarized is. By the way, there are 2 ways to draw a line. There's no such thing as a point or a line. There's only such thing as a point line. This is how a human draws a line, okay? Obviously so. This is how Mother Nature draws a line. Oh my God, that makes so much sense. Here we have counter space. Over here we have space, the creation of space. But over we have F and M, force and motion, space, creation of space, and force and motion. Oh my God, it's that simple. Counter space. You want to see something? Oh my God, it's so simple. Let's look at a magnet here. You see that? Dielectric inertial plane right in the middle here. You see that? Line right in the center there. Oh my God. Look at that. It's so simple. Right there. The point of counter space. If you take this magnet, and if you're able to cut it, and it's actually ceramic, you can't really cut it, but if you're able to cut it like a big hunk of salami, each little slice, if you made 1,000 slices out of this magnet, each little slice would have its own dielectric inertial plane. It is self-centering. Why is it self-centering? Because it is counter space. It is the point of inertia. Everything over here, force and motion. Force and motion. Mother Nature is divinely simple. She's not an insane crack whore like quantum mechanics and general relativity would have you believe. She's not. Point of inertia. Force and motion. Inertia and acceleration. Now here's something counterintuitive. As acceleration increases, motion decreases. What? That makes no sense. Now think about that. Pause to think about it. As acceleration, let's just call this the idiot term that we currently use, gravity. Okay? It's no different than dielectric acceleration, DA, dielectric acceleration. What are idiots? We call it gravity. Increasing acceleration equals decreasing force and motion. Do you get it now? That makes no sense. Increasing acceleration is decreasing motion. Oh my God, I get it now. Oh, Mother Nature is so simple. It's so simple. Why didn't they teach this crap to you in school? Because we don't get it. We're still living in the Stone Age intellectually, especially when it comes to field theory. Stone Age. Every branch of science throughout history, 50 years ago, 100, 200, 300, 400, no matter when you go, they all thought the crap was right. Today is no different. We're technologically advanced and we're intellectually freaking morons. Well, some of us are. Most of us are anyway. You don't understand a damn thing. You just don't. Space, just as Tesla said, and he was correct, has no attributes. Space is neither a field nor a force. It acts on nothing, and it does nothing. Let's use a really simple, stupid analogy to make things really simple. I love little simple demonstrations. What are we talking about when we talk about inertia? Well, you saw the center of the magnet, right? Dielectric inertial plane. Oh, God, it stuck to the table. Dielectric inertial plane. You saw that? That thin line right in the middle? Yes? Dielectric inertia. Everything over here is force and motion. Everything over here is force and motion. You're actually measured with a Gauss meter. It's very simple. They have the centrifugal point of divergence, max here, mediocre here, really tight here. You can see this underneath the ferrocell. Yes, this tattooed fat asshole in front of you, well, not in front of you, is the first person in the world to figure out how a magnet works and what magnetism is. What is inertia? What is force and motion? What is space? Let's just make it really, really simple. Let's see if you can figure it out. Inertia, the loss of inertia. Let's assume this is inertia. Let's assume, remember our magnet? The dielectric inertial plane of the magnet? Right? Let's see if I can zoom out here. Let's zoom out. Dielectric inertial plane of the magnet. What happens with the loss of inertia? This is the dielectric inertial plane. Just assume that this is infinitely thin to the point of zero. What happens with the necessitated loss of inertia? Oh my God. That makes so much sense. What is the necessary byproduct of the loss of inertia? You see all these voids between these inertial points which are reciprocating across the middle? They're reciprocating to the center, reciprocating centrifugally, then returning centripetally, centrifugal, divergence, convergence. What is happening as the loss of inertia occurs? Okay, we're releasing inertia. What happens? Oh, what is between these points of reciprocating loss of inertia? Oh my God, that's space. You can't reify space as something that does something. It's like reifying a shadow. A shadow is not a subject. It is an attribute. What is a shadow? It is the absence of light. A shadow does nothing. Well, you could say, well, a shadow makes you cold. A shadow keeps you... A shadow is absence. Space is the posterior attribute of the loss of inertia. Oh my God, that kind of makes sense. It seems so logical. Why, yes, it is. All these reciprocating points of inertia, which actually are circular, you can see it underneath the ferrocell. So simple. The loss of inertia necessitates the creation. So it's no different than saying that eating, you feed a horse a giant bucket of something, it's going to take a big shit of something. It's a necessitated attribute of something else, a posterior principle which is defining itself in attribution. There is no such thing. Here's the principle of the entire universe. There is no such thing as any principle that doesn't have an attribute. What do I mean by that? Light and illumination are an inseparable singular entity. Okay? You cannot differentiate out light from illumination. You cannot differentiate out inertia from the reciprocative loss of inertia. It's actually defined by equation I discovered 12 years ago. It's an expression 1 over 5 to the power of -3. It is very simplex. It is very divine. I've proven it. Underneath the ferrocell, the actual geometry of magnetic reciprocation, the phase shift of the poles. You have rarefaction on the North Pole and compression on the South Pole. I showed it to you in the seed experiments. Remember the seed experiments videos? Just is no different. Think of this as infinitely small, the dielectric inertial plane of a magnet, as I just showed you prior. What happens with the loss of inertia as it must necessarily reciprocate? Space is a posterior attribute. What Einstein and general relativity has done is they reified the horse shit as having to do with the horse. No, it is the posterior attribute of the goings-on the actual attribution of the principle. What does it mean, the attribution of the principle? It means there's no difference between defining light and what light does, light and illumination. The Greeks call this the aoristos dias. The aoristos dias. In the ancient Egyptians, they call it ahorismos. Is the indefinable attribute which has no quantity. It is only the attributional quality of what something does, which is indifferentiate from what it is. It sounds really so complicated. I mean, you can spend thousands and thousands of pages of text talking about this principle alone, but it's just so simple. The loss of inertia necessitates the creation of something else. But you can't reify that something else, i.e. space, as something that does something. Space is neither a field nor a force. It acts on nothing and it does nothing. Okay? We can't reify a shadow as something unto itself. It's a posterior attribute of the absence of illumination. We talk about light and shadows. A shadow has no... It's the same thing with emptiness. Emptiness is nothing. There is no such thing as emptiness. It's a qualifier of something else. These are all human conceptual reifications. The huge ones. Space and emptiness. Neither one of these exists. Neither one of these exist. Something X is empty of Y. Okay? This is a qualifier. Space is a qualifier too. Space is the absence of inertia. It's the posterior attribute of the reciprocation of inertia. Neither space nor emptiness exist. They're illusions. They're the holographic projecta. They're the phantasms of existential existence. They talk about an atom being 99.9999% empty space, and then if all the space inside every atom was removed, the Earth would be something like the size of a marble or smaller. It'd probably be actually a lot smaller than that. But it's not space. It's the reciprocation of the dynamis inside of an atom, which is releasing and reciprocating out magnetism. Magnetism, Faraday had it right. He never explained what a magnet was or what magnetism is, but he was so close, and nobody has come closer for those many, many decades ago than Faraday. He said that magnetism is the dielectric field. I don't know if you know who Faraday was. Most people do that are into field theory or electrical theory. They know who Faraday was. But he called it the dielectric field, which is exactly what it is. The loss of dielectric inertia as expressed by force and motion as magnetism reciprocates from either side. You can see this underneath the ferrocell. You can see it. I wished every one of you people could hold a ferrocell in your hand and actually see. It's like less than 1 micron thin, and yet you can see almost 4 inches of depth. The actual hypertrochoidal, reciprocating processional hyperboloid, and that's copyright mine, by the way, 2014. The reciprocating processional hyperboloid that expresses itself necessarily as a hypertrochoidal pattern. Is simplex pressure mediation. I mean, as a little child, do you remember having a bubble wand, and the end of it, of the bubble wands, the really fancy one, they'd have a square hole, and they'd have a round hole, and they'd have like a triangular hole, and you dip this crap in the bubble stuff. And of course, it doesn't matter which hole you blow it out of, blow the sun. You remember which hole you blew, you'd end up with a round bubble, right? Pressure mediation, simplex. Matter if you're blowing the soapy film crap out of the square, the round, or the triangular hole, you can end up with a round bubble, right? You remember that crap as a child? Same thing with a magnet. Doesn't matter if this magnet is square, triangular, circular. There's all sorts of freaky-ass shapes that a magnet can be cast into. But the field underneath the ferrocell will be exactly as I predicted. Exactly the same. It is always the same. It has to be the same. It's no different than the old plumber's motto that the water flows downhill. It's simplex pressure mediation of a field. But a field has no quanta. Okay? There is no quantity in a field. This is what scares general relativity and quantum mechanics so much that they devised a bullshit term to replace ether. They're like, well, we're going to call it quantum fluid. Ether is the giant evil word that these assholes will never use. It's the most evil word in the world to them. Just bring up the word ether. You can hear their sphincter pucker. But the only way you really want to scare them and shut them the hell up, you just run into someone with their head just so full, it's just ready to pop. They think they're so effing smart, and yet they're so stupid. Just ask them like a child would, okay? Sir, can you define this one word? No! They will never define it. They might blow smoke up your ass or give you, just some sort of, well, it's too complex for you to, no, it's you don't understand what this word is. Everything in the universe is fields, and science thinks we're technologically advanced, although not that technologically advanced. But we're intellectually stupid. Okay, we've invented a whole lot of crap because we know how to recreate things, we know how a lot of things work, but we can't explain them. Okay, descriptions are not explanations. And everything in the universe is this: fields. Quantum mechanics, general relativity, and current science has never defined this word. Never an explanation for this word. This is how you scare the piss out of these assholes that think they're so smart. Just ask them to define this word. It's like, no. You gave a description. I want an explanation, asshole. Explain this word. Okay? They can't do it. Not even to save their own life could they ever define this word. Explain it, excuse me. Anyway, thanks for watching. There's no such thing as an autonomous field modality known as gravity. It's dielectric acceleration. Magnetism, that's the loss of inertia. The only thing that actually gives volume to the entire universe is magnetism. Anyway, I could make like 1,000 videos on this, and still about that many people would get it. I'd like to make a simple video on field theory that hopefully even a 12-year-old child could understand. Now, instead of looking this as a circle, just think it as an infinite point of without spatial volume. And if we look at it this way, we're more easily able to understand it. We think of this as an indivisible line that actually has no extension. We're talking about unmanifest inertia, or what quantum mechanics and general relativity and their insanity have called dark matter or quantum fluid, which is just nothing other than a euphemism for what Tesla, Heaviside, Steinmetz, Faraday, and all the greats of electrical theory that gave us 100% of our current electrical grid and system. Einstein gave us nothing of that. Nothing. Okay? He invented nothing, he discovered nothing, and his quote-unquote theory of relativity is mostly stolen from Henri Poincaré. Excuse me, my French is not so great. Henri Poincaré. I'm sure I'm still pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, as far as field theory, we only have two field modalities, and we have one field. There is only one field. Now, we think in terms of electrostatics, like dielectricity. We think of terms of magnetic field, electrical, and then we think of gravitational field. But ultimately, I hope to make this really fast and simple for you to understand it, that there's only one field, and there's the loss of that field as expressed by magnetism, i.e. the loss of inertia, because there's only two principles that rule the entire universe: force in motion and inertia and acceleration. Well, how do you tie all four of them together rationally? Now, actually, let me show you this. Now, as you've seen underneath the ferrocell, a magnet, doesn't matter what shape it is, looks exactly like this. It looks like a torus. It looks like well, of course, most people can't visualize that. I can. A reciprocating processional hyperboloid, which sounds complicated, but is divinely simplex. Now, you see the spirograph-like hypertrochoidal pattern. If you're able to get it underneath the camera better, I'll show it to you in a slightly uncompressed fashion. There you go. You actually see a torus, a toroid, a spirograph, a hypertrochoid. That's the expression of the loss of inertia. Now, as Faraday called magnetism, he called it the dielectric field. But what does that mean specifically? It means that the necessitated loss of inertia, i.e. the ether, must be expressed as the creation of space, and of course the posterior attribute of the creation of space is a measure of movements of magnitude, which we call time, but of course time does not exist. Time is a human contrivance. Here we have dielectricity with absolutely no manifestation as a linear propagation. Now, we think of a single point, i.e. the ether, as being unmanifest. A longitudinal propagation, such as found in electromagnetism, i.e. radio or regular light, obviously has a longitudinal pulse between each waveform of the electrical value and the magnetic value of the waveform of the transverse electromagnetism. Now here we have electricity, which, by the way, is phi times psi q in Planck electrification. Electricity is nothing other than the hybrid of electricity and magnetism operating together, which is found in, obviously, frequency and amplitude, constantly pulsing back and forth like this. Well, what frequency? What amplitude? Obviously, we have the entire EM spectrum, and we have electricity. So electricity is a hybrid of dielectricity and of magnetism, operating at a frequency and an amplitude, obviously so. Now, in the case of, and to make this really simple so that a child could understand, like electromagnet that pulls up cars, obviously an enormous amount of voltage is actually dropped to the lifter, like the lifter magnet that picks up dead cars and re-scraps out things. Now, electricity doesn't terminate as magnetism, or doesn't terminate into magnetism by dumping that charge and creating a large electromagnet. It loses its dielectric component. So electricity terminates not into magnetism as wrongly thought, but as magnetism by losing its dielectric component. In other words, all that electricity that is actually brought through electromagnet to lift up dead cars so they could be scrapped is nothing other than the loss of the dielectric component of electricity, which means you have an extremely high Gauss field that is able to pick up multi-ton cars with that electromagnet. It is that electricity terminates as magnetism by losing its dielectric component, not into magnetism, but as magnetism, because electricity is the hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism. Phi times psi equals Q, Planck, and electrification. Electricity, by definition, denotatively, is the combination of two things, dielectricity and magnetism. So by losing its dielectric component, the electricity manifests itself in the electromagnet, for example, as a huge, enormous, very powerful high Gauss magnetic field. Now, where does gravity come into play? Well, we think gravity is something different. Now, we know in galactic jets, we see enormous amounts of shooting matter shooting out billions of light years at either end of galactic jets. Now, the necessary loss of inertia, which manifests itself as longitudinal dielectricity, is an equation. It's 1 over phi to the power of -3, which some people would think would be a number, but it's actually an expression. And that expression, if we were to think of this as a 0 point, which is invisible rather than seeing the circle, that equation necessitates the expression, which we know that the attributional nature of the ether expresses itself as longitudinal dielectricity by that equation that I discovered 12 years ago. So where does gravity come into play? Gravity, like electricity, is nothing other than a hybrid. So what is gravity? Well, we talk about what denotes gravity. We're talking about mass, i.e. matter. Matter is nothing more than a dielectric condensate. Okay, it's like taking carbon dioxide and freezing it to its solid state. Now, obviously, that is a huge hyperbole, and that's a supreme oversimplification, but this is matter. Okay, obviously extremely simplex. Let's just think of this as the hydrogen atom. Even that is too simple, obviously, this model, of course. But we have, as of course modern science likes to say, well, 99.99999% of an atom is empty space. That's not true. There's supposed empty space in here, and an atom is magnetodielectricity, and what we think are electron atoms. Now, by the way, Tesla, Heaviside, Steinmetz, Faraday, on and on, even the discoverer, J.J. Thomson of the quote-unquote electron, denied for a long time that the electron is a particle. There's absolutely no such thing as an electron particle. And email me if you want a huge list of logical reasoning behind this. But the premise that we have that
that wires are like huge rain sticks that little electron atoms are pouring through. Oliver Heaviside called this, I think he called it a mind virus. Eric Dollard called it the same thing. Tesla, on 2 different occasions, said that the notion that the electron was a particle was absolutely absurd. So everybody that gave you 100% of our current electrical grid, these people weren't stupid, by the way. But everything now is based upon Greek atomism. That's all general relativity and quantum mechanics is nothing other than atomism. If you don't know what atomism is, then I suggest you look it up. It basically means that the whole universe is just a giant bag of magical, unseen particles rolling around like BBs and volleyballs, they're bumping into each other. And of course, they've never defined a field. Never. They never will define a field because fields are particle-free. They'll never define instantaneous action at a distance, such as EPR. Look up EPR paradox. But we know that it exists. See, faster than light travel, instantaneous action at a distance contradicts the entire premise of general relativity and quantum mechanics, and so does the denotation of the term field, which has never been explained, never been defined. Human understanding is still in the Stone Ages. We think are so advanced with our computers and our TV sets, but ultimately we're pretty stupid. So ultimately, let's look again. Remember back to the Ferrel cell. You see this again? This toroidal form that you see underneath the Ferrel cell? That's magnetism as painted by light. Tim van der Rille's wonderful invention. So you can think of this as a 0-point ether pressure that has been released, longitudinal. The expression of that form in transverse reciprocating processional hyperboloid is magnetism. We have ultimately only one field, dielectricity. We have the loss of that field's potential, just like releasing charge on a battery, for example. And the release of that field, i.e. inertia, i.e. dielectricity, is force in motion. Okay? 100% of the visible universe is magnetism. Okay, the entire atomic structure of an atom in picometers, as it measured in picometers, is due to magnetism, not dielectricity. So we have one field, one release of that field's potential, i.e. the loss of that inertia, as expressed in force and motion, and we have 2 field modalities, one being electricity, okay, frequency and amplitude, and the other one being gravity, which is a dielectric condensate. We have a nucleus, okay? Right here we have tons of magnetodielectric space created. Okay, space is not a thing. Space is neither a field nor a force. Space acts on nothing. Space does nothing. This is the ultimate brain virus and huge flaw that Tesla says over and over again, as well as others, of general relativity, is reified space as something that does something. It's like saying a shadow has done something, or a shadow is the absence of something. Okay, the absence of inertia. Let's just consider the central point here, which is not a point. It's even prior to a point. That the loss of that inertia is expressed in force and motion, leaves behind it a wake that us humans and our stupidity, all of us, call space. Okay, we live in it, we breathe in it because we're all existential beings, but that space is neither a field nor a force. It does nothing and it acts on nothing. So here we have a dielectric condensate we call mass or matter in its most simplex form, obviously. An oversimplification, to be sure, with this model, which is a toroflux, by the way. This cute little toy is called a toroflux. It's a neat little device that every little child should have that gets them thinking in multi-dimensional geometric fashions. So that's the irreducible simplicity of the universe. I have to stick fast to this and say that it's absolutely irrefutable. As far as a grand unified theory, I mean, it's already been discovered. Whether anybody accepts it or not, it doesn't make any difference to me. I'm just happy to understand it. But we only have one field, that's dielectricity, i.e. the ether, expressed longitudinally. That's the longitudinal pulse found within transverse electromagnetism. We have the loss of that inertia, the loss of that acceleration as expressed by force and motion. Now, as I told you in prior videos, there's a huge difference, especially in field theory, between acceleration and motion. Increasing acceleration in terms of gravity, for example, which is an acceleration towards dielectric avoidance, okay, Gravity is nothing other than dielectricity. Gravity is no different than turning on your TV set and actually shining a light off from the side and seeing the little dust particles actually head to the TV set and stick to the TV set. That's why your front of your TV set, especially the little CRT tubes, got so dusty. The dust in the air would go gravitate to the front of the tube. That is the exact same thing as gravity. People think that that is an electrostatic charge, or like you charge a balloon up and you pull someone's hair to it. That same acceleration, not force, that same acceleration is what we ignorantly call gravity. Gravity itself is an autonomous acceleration, of which a lot of people call it incorrectly a force, does not exist. It's like, what do you mean gravity doesn't exist? All of a sudden, drop this and there's gravity.
This is called gravity.
What I mean specifically is that gravity does not exist. It is not an autonomous force. It's definitely not a force, which of course even the idiots of general relativity and quantum mechanics will admit to. They call it an acceleration. But an acceleration of what? By what? We need explanations, not descriptions. And all that general relativity and quantum mechanics provides are descriptions, not explanations. It is a dielectric acceleration. It's dielectric avoidance. Okay, it is the loss of force in motion, because there are no straight lines in the universe. What we think are straight lines in the universe are infinitely slightly curved. There's not a single straight line anywhere in the universe. None, nowhere, ever, never. It doesn't exist. So, hopefully I made that very simple. We have one field. We have the loss of that field expressed as force in motion, and we have two field modalities. One expressed as a dielectric condensate, which we call matter, mass, okay? And the other one, which is expressed by longitudinal transverse force and motion, transverse electromagnetism expressed in frequency and amplitude, what we call electricity. So dielectricity, electrostatics, electricity, magnetism, and quote-unquote gravity are one thing only. It's our only pathetic human understanding of the nature of the universe that we think these are four separate things. Really, they're just one thing.
Gravity, gravity, gravity.
So dielectricity, electrostatics, electricity, magnetism, and quote-unquote gravity are one thing only. It's our only pathetic human understanding of the nature of the universe that we think these are four separate things. Really, they're just one thing.